welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is minorities in journalism, and we're fortunate to have with us this morning to talk about minorities in journalism, Ms. Princess Gordon-Patton, who is a communication specialist with the Extension Program at Tennessee State University. And Ms. Patton, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Good morning.
You know, I think to talk about what I consider to be a very, very important topic, minorities in journalism, because I think when we look at minority representation in journalism almost across the board, we find that in a real sense that they are underrepresented, whether you're dealing with African Americans or Hispanics or whatever, and et cetera. That's what you would like to talk about.
Right.
And let's have you do that. But now, before we get into a conversation about minorities in journalism, let's talk about Princess Gordon-Patton. To have you to give us some information about your background, your education, your experiences, and some of the things that in a real sense led you to be a leader in this whole movement of increasing the number of minorities in journalism. Let's do it from that perspective.
I grew up here in Nashville, and I'm a graduate of Cameron High School, and I have the distinction of being one of those who was in the last graduating class. That's 1971. And when I left there, I went to Fisk University and studied political science. And while I was there, when I first started, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I began to see by my junior year that I really love writing for the sake of writing. I'd been writing all my life, whether it was poems or short stories. I always was writing. And then I decided, yes, I really like that. And then I changed and decided to go to UT. At that time, Fisk did not have a journalism department. So I took a year off and went to UT. Then it was in Nashville, as you know. It was what is now TSU's downtown campus. And I spent a year there and went back to Fisk University and took my last semester and graduated from there with a degree in political science and journalism. And so at that time, I knew that I wanted to be a writer, and I was able to do some short stories and send some freelance articles in. But later on, I was at Vanderbilt University for a while working with the Vanderbilt Register. And during that period, my writing increased, and I was being seen, and the Tennessean was looking for a black person to be on the editorial board. They had never had a full-time person on the editorial board, so the word went out, who shall we get? And then someone working at Vanderbilt came to me and said, well, I told them you need Princess. And that's how I ended up at Vanderbilt. And on the Vanderbilt Register, as I say, I did my writing, and so I really enjoyed that experience. But then I was thrown into this editorial board filling a daily newspaper, and that was exciting times. And I was able to have my own column where I did lots of local issues, columns on things that were happening, things that people were concerned about, African Americans particularly were concerned about. Sometimes I just talked about issues, things that affect us every day, all of us, our everyday lives. But then when things happened in the community that needed a perspective from an African American, then I was there to do that. And I enjoyed that experience at the Tennessee, and I also had an opportunity to be on board when different political candidates came in, and we talked to them, and that is an exciting experience. If you've never had it, you should try that sometime. People feel like they're being grilled, and they tend to act a little bit differently in a situation like that. But I took off from the Tennessean about 4 years ago. I decided I wanted to grow because I was the editor of Letters to the Editor for a while, and I decided that I wanted to grow, and I went to Tennessee State University and worked on a master's degree in education. So now I have a master's of education, and I still have this in my blood. I've always wanted to be a teacher, but I've never been in a school situation other than like student teaching, but I still have that. And even as communication specialist, this is my opportunity of outreach, my way to reach out to the community through my program, through the journalism program, to bring others on board into a career that I think is very exciting this time.
You know, I think that you've already, through your own background and experiences and et cetera, have already demonstrated that that there's a tremendous need for minorities in these areas. So let's talk about minority representation from whatever perspective you like to deal with it in the area of journalism, print, or media, however you'd like to do that.
Well, the main thing that we've always been concerned about is numbers. How many African Americans are there on the papers, on daily papers across the nation? And it's very few. I think at the last time the statistics came in, it was hovering around 10%. And of that group, maybe 8% is African American, and the other is other, of course. And what we would like to see is daily newspapers of the staff should be representative of the community. If you look at Nashville, for example, 25% of Nashville's population is African American. But if you look at the staff of the Tennessean, approximately 4 to 6% is African American. So that's the main concern, getting us out there and getting us on those papers, because we bring to it a different perspective and a different sensitivity. Because many times when things happen in papers, and you know, the African American community can be very critical of newspapers and how they play stories and how you're always saying something negative about us. But when you have African Americans on the staff, as I say, they bring that sensitivity to it, and a lot of times they know the right things to say, and they try to be more careful about the picture that they're painting, because things happen in all communities, but we shouldn't just focus on one particular aspect of a community.
And so minority participation on newspapers would really, in a real sense, open up the entire community as well as open up the newspapers. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, it definitely would. And we're not only concerned about the number of reporters, for example, those who are out there in the trenches. We also need to be concerned about management. Look at the those who are on the masthead of your newspaper. Just take a look at it and go down the names and find the African Americans who are there. So we need to be in those positions where we can make decisions and we can decide which stories need to be in the paper.
Would you say that in a real sense we are really unaware within Nashville of the number of African Americans or minorities that are participating in the news arena, the media in a real sense, not only newspapers but television, radio, and et cetera, and et cetera?
Well, African Americans are real consumers of newspapers. We really read them. They're very important to us, and we like to see our faces in them. It's the same as with television, and commercials have responded to that. Now they have, you know, the African American with any different type of product that's being sold, because people want to see themselves. They want to know what it feels like to be in that car, for example. So we should be doing the same thing with newspapers. We need to bring, you know, the black community more into focus. And black people do buy newspapers, and they want to be seen, especially in society events. So many times you'll see that we are left out. And in many instances, what has happened with African Americans, they don't feel that they have a voice with the mainstream daily newspapers, and they go to your different alternative newspapers, and there are a couple in the city. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with an alternative paper. That's just an additional paper, but we should be able to feel like the daily newspaper belongs to all of us.
Now, I understand that you've undertaken a program that deals specifically with trying to increase the number of minorities in the area of journalism, and of course we've got about a minute before we have our first commercial break today, but I want you to talk about that program, and more specifically, I'm sort of intrigued by the person whose name is connected with that program, Ida B. Wells. I think that in a real sense, you sort of represent what Ida B. Wells stood for during the entire period. So let's have you, when we come back after this commercial, to not only talk about this program that has her name associated with it, but in a real sense to sort of give us a little information about Ida B. Wells and who she was and what she stood for, and perhaps that might serve as an encouragement really to some of our young people who would then want to become more involved in what you have to say. And so we'll do that when we have our first commercial break, after our first commercial break, and we'll be back with you following this.